They killed Big Bertha. For 3 years, that 8-pound bass came to my dock every morning. I named her, fed her, watched her grow. Now she's floating belly up with 200 other fish because my HOA president thinks she owns my lake. At sunrise, the smell hit me first, sharp copper sulfate mixed with rotting scales. Vivian Blackwater had poured $3,500 worth of industrial algaseed into my crystal clear water overnight, turning it the color of antifreeze. I stood on my dock holding Bertha's slimy, lifeless body, shaking with rage. Then it hit me, something darkly beautiful. Vivian's prize subdivision gets its drinking water from the same underground spring that feeds my lake. 847 homes. Every drop, every house. She hadn't just poisoned my fish. She'd poisoned her entire neighborhood. And she had no idea what was about to hit her. Ever had neighbors who think they can destroy your property because they don't like what you're doing? Tell me where you're watching from, and if you got an HOA nightmare, drop it below, because this story is about to get wild. My name's Marcus Reed. I'm 52, and I never thought I'd be at war with a woman who probably spends more on her manicures than I make in a week. But that's suburbia for you. I'm a retired electrician turned solar panel installer here in Pine Ridge, North Carolina. The kind of guy who fixes things with his hands and believes people should mind their own business. My 12-acre property with its spring-fed lake has been in my family since 1952, back when this whole area was tobacco fields and common sense. Every morning I walked the gravel path my grandfather laid, boots crunching on stones worn smooth by decades of fishermen. The dock planks feel warm and weathered under my hands, still sticky with morning dew. Honeysuckle mixes with the clean mineral scent of spring water. Blue herons nest in the cypress trees. Bass jump at dawn. For 70 years, this place was pure peace. Then the developers came. 15 years ago, they bought everything around me and built Willow Creek Estates. 847 McMansions starting at $600,000. They offered me millions for the lake. Wanted it for their country club. I told them to build their clubhouse in hell. Most of the new neighbors were fine. Normal people. Wave when they jogged by. Maybe asked about the fishing. But then Vivian Blackwater moved in. Picture this. 47 years old. White Lexus. Detailed more often than most people shower. Carries a leather portfolio to neighborhood barbecues. Talks like a lawyer even when she orders coffee. Throws around phrases like property value optimization and aesthetic compliance standards. Probably schedules her bathroom breaks. Vivian appointed herself HOA president within 6 months and immediately launched her enhancement campaigns, which is fancy talk for making everyone miserable until they bow to her suburban dictatorship. Her opening shot came 3 months after she moved in. Certified mail, official letterhead. The whole production. My unsightly fishing activities were disturbing her peaceful enjoyment of the neighborhood. She'd paid $800,000 for that lakefront view, and apparently watching me catch dinner was ruining her investment. The legal threats escalated fast. She claimed my dock violated aesthetic covenants that were supposed to apply to all properties. She actually demanded I tear down a structure that's been here since before she was born. I called my buddy Tom Martinez, real estate lawyer, savior of my hide more than once. He nearly choked on his coffee laughing. Marcus, property that predates an HOA can't be subjected to retroactive covenants. She's threatening you with laws that don't exist. Knowledge nugget. If your property existed before an HOA was formed, their rules generally can't be applied to your land retroactively. Your deed date is your legal shield. When intimidation failed, Vivian filed a false complaint with the county about my illegal dock structure. The poor inspector drove out here, looked at my 1987 permits, and apologized for wasting my time. You could practically see him rolling his eyes. That's when she revealed her true nature. Every morning at 6 a.m., while I fished, Vivian suddenly needed emergency landscaping. Leaf blowers, chainsaws, industrial mowers screaming at full volume along her property line. Diesel fumes drifted across my lake, mixing with honeysuckle and turning my peaceful morning into a highway construction zone. Her crew got more overtime in 2 months than most people see all year, all to harass one guy trying to fish in his own backyard. But I kept fishing. Some principles are worth defending, even against suburban tyrants with too much money and too little sense. I had no idea she was crazy enough to commit environmental terrorism to get her way. You know what's worse than a Karen with a law degree? A Karen who thinks property surveys are weapons of mass destruction. 2 weeks after the county inspector laughed at her dock complaint, Vivian hired the most expensive surveyor in 3 counties to verify our property boundaries. Not because there was any doubt. My grandfather marked those lines with concrete posts that'll probably outlast civilization, but as pure harassment with professional invoice. The surveyor showed up Tuesday morning with equipment worth more than my truck. GPS units, laser levels, gadgets that cost more per hour than most people make in a day. I watched from my kitchen window, sipping coffee, as they spent 6 hours measuring the same boundary that's been legally established since Truman was president. 3 days later, Vivian's lawyer sent me a registered letter claiming my dock extended exactly 6 inches onto community water rights. 6 inches on a lake that's been in my family since before she was born. Then she filed an actual lawsuit in county court for property encroachment, professional letterhead, court stamps, filing fees that probably cost more than most people's car payments. All over 6 inches of dock space. While her legal papers crawled through the system, she launched a Facebook campaign that would make a political operative jealous. Posted in the Willow Creek Estates group about her difficult neighbor, refusing to respect community standards. The comment section turned into a digital lynch mob faster than you could say property values. But 2 can play the research game. I spent my weekend in the county courthouse basement breathing dust older than Vivian's entire career, digging through deed records and property transfers. Sometimes the best revenge is just knowing more than your enemy. And holy hell, did I hit the jackpot. My grandfather didn't just own the land. He owned exclusive water rights to the entire lake system. Every drop, every fish, every molecule of H2O. The original 1952 deed specifically included all water rights, surface and subsurface, including natural springs and tributaries. But here's the beautiful part. The lake is spring-fed from an underground aquifer that runs directly beneath Vivian's precious subdivision. Legally speaking, every time her neighbors flush their toilets, they're using my water. Knowledge nugget. Water rights often transfer separately from land ownership and are recorded in property deeds. These rights can be worth more than the land itself. I called Tom Martinez with my discovery. After he stopped cackling, he said, "Marcus, you don't just have a defense. You got a nuclear weapon disguised as a property deed." So we filed a countersuit for harassment, slander, and abusive legal process. The timing was pure poetry. Vivian was hosting one of her fancy backyard dinner parties. 40 HOA residents standing around with wine glasses, complaining about property taxes, while eating food that cost more per bite than most people spend on lunch. The evening air smelled of catered salmon and pretentious conversation. Champagne glasses caught the golden hour light. Everyone dressed like they were auditioning for a real estate commercial. Right in the middle of Vivian's speech about maintaining community standards, our sheriff's deputy walked through her back gate like he owned the place. "Ma'am, I need to serve you with some legal documents." 40 conversations stopped mid-sentence. Ice clinked nervously in glasses as Vivian's perfectly manicured hands trembled reading the papers. Her foundation couldn't hide how pale she went when she realized what she was holding. "This is harassment," she shrieked loud enough to rattle windows. "That redneck is trying to intimidate me with frivolous lawsuits." And there it was. The mask slipped. The refined real estate attorney became just another suburban tyrant melting down because someone dared to fight back. Her dinner guests suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Amazing how fast rich people can evacuate when someone starts screaming about rednecks at a catered party. But Vivian wasn't done. The next morning, I found an anonymous note under my windshield wiper. "Stop fishing or face the consequences." Apparently, public humiliation just made her more dangerous. Anonymous threats are cute. What Vivian did next was straight-up government weaponization. There's nothing quite like watching a real estate attorney turn federal agencies into her personal attack dogs. Within a week of my countersuit, I had more government inspectors crawling over my property then a meth lab bust. Fish and Wildlife showed up first, clipboards in hand, claiming they needed to investigate potential disruption to migratory bird patterns caused by my fishing activities. I'm not making this up. She actually convinced a federal agency that me catching base was somehow screwing with duck GPS systems. Next came the EPA inspector, suited up like he was entering Chernobyl, armed with water testing kits and a clipboard thicker than Vivian's legal bills. Apparently, my private lake usage might be creating environmental hazards. The irony of that accusation would hit me like a freight train later. County Health Department on Thursday. Code Enforcement Friday. By week's end, I had more regulatory business cards than a Washington lobbyist. Each inspector found exactly what you'd expect from the cleanest lake in 3 counties. Absolutely nothing wrong. But bureaucratic harassment is a two-way street, and I was about to learn how to drive it. While Vivian was playing puppet master with government agencies, I was making friends with the puppets. Turns out when you're polite to overworked civil servants forced to investigate obviously bogus complaints, they remember you. They also remember who's wasting their time. Dolores Martinez became my secret weapon. 68-year-old retired county clerk with memory, like a steel trap, and a grudge against corrupt developers. Over coffee that tasted like justice and caffeine, she dropped a bombshell that made my head spin. Marcus, that whole subdivision was built on protected wetlands. The developer got his permits by promising to preserve all natural water features forever. It's federal law. The coffee cup felt warm in my hands as the implications sank in. Knowledge nugget. Development permits often contain perpetual preservation clauses that legally bind all future property owners. Violating these environmental restrictions can trigger massive federal penalties. I spent the next weekend playing environmental detective, and what I discovered was better than winning the lottery. Vivian's landscaping contractor, the same diesel-belching crew that had been serenading my fishing trips, was using my lake as their personal garbage dump. Grass clippings, hedge trimmings, fertilizer-soaked debris, all of it flowing directly into federally protected wetlands. Every Saturday at dawn, like clockwork, I became an environmental paparazzi. Hidden in the tree lean, camera in hand, the sweet scent of honeysuckle mixed with diesel exhaust as the rough oak bark pressed into my back. I waited for the perfect shot. 3rd Saturday in a row, I caught them, dumping organic waste straight into my water. The splash echoed across the still morning air. My photos were crisp, time-stamped, GPS-logged, high-resolution evidence of federal crimes happening in broad daylight. But the real jackpot came when I ran their plates. Pristine Landscaping, LLC. 40% owned by Richard Blackwater, Vivian's husband, real estate developer, and apparently part-time environmental criminal. The EPA doesn't just like environmental violations with photo evidence. They worship them when it's tied to harassment campaigns. I filed my complaint Monday morning with a smile bright enough to power half the county. By Wednesday, Pristine Landscaping was under federal investigation. By Friday, Richard lost 3 county contracts. Turns out when you're dumping organic waste into protected wetlands, municipalities suddenly don't want you maintaining their public parks. Who could have guessed? The sound of Vivian's perfectly controlled world starting to crack was sweeter than Sunday church bells. But if I thought this would humble her, I was spectacularly wrong. Nothing makes a desperate woman more dangerous than watching her husband's business empire crumble because of her own vendetta. Vivian Blackwater was about to prove she'd rather burn down the neighborhood than admit defeat. The morning I found an Algicide Company's business card tucked under my windshield wiper, I knew we'd cross a line, from legal warfare into something much darker. The card smelled faintly of chlorine and desperation. Environmental terrorism was apparently Vivian's next play. Too bad she didn't realize she was about to poison her own drinking water. That card wasn't just a threat. It was a confession waiting to happen. While I was out of town visiting Sandra's sister in Charlotte, Vivian was busy preparing for environmental war. She found Clearwater Solutions, a commercial algae company specializing in industrial-strength pond treatments, the kind of chemicals that can sterilize a lake faster than you can say property values. Here's where her lawyer brain really shined. She called Clearwater and lied through her perfectly veneered teeth, claiming my lake was community property. suffering a dangerous algae bloom threatening public health. She paid $3,500 in cash for a midnight chemical assault on what she called an emergency environmental situation. The irony would have been hilarious if it wasn't about to murder everything I loved. When I came home Sunday evening, the smell hit me before I even stepped out of my truck. The sharp metallic stench of copper sulfate mixed with mass death. The water had turned an unnatural blue-green, like antifreeze stirred with apocalypse. Big Bertha, my 8-pound bass who came to my dock every morning for 3 years, floated 20 feet from the dock, already bloated. 200 other fish floated alongside her. Bluegill, crappie, catfish. An entire ecosystem assassinated overnight because one woman couldn't stand watching someone enjoy their own property. My hand shook as I fumbled for my phone, slick with sweat and pure rage. The county's environmental emergency hotline connected me to Officer Jim Patterson, a veteran of 15 years investigating illegal dumping. When I described the scene, his voice shifted from bureaucratic boredom to DEFCON 1. Don't touch anything. Keep pets away. Don't disturb the evidence. I'm bringing the hazmat team. Patterson arrived with equipment that looked like it belonged on Mars. Test strips turned colors that don't exist in nature. Deep blues and purples screaming massive chemical contamination. The acrid smell of the tests mixed with the lake's death made my eyes water. Industrial-strength copper sulfate poisoning, he said, his voice tight with fury. Whoever did this didn't just kill your fish. They sterilized the entire ecosystem for 2 to 3 years minimum. This is felony destruction of property, possibly federal environmental terrorism. Knowledge nugget. Illegal dumping of industrial chemicals on private property constitutes felony destruction in most states and triggers federal environmental crime charges carrying 5 to 10-year prison sentences. But Patterson wasn't done playing detective. While I held a garbage bag that used to be my fishing paradise, he reviewed security footage from Mrs. Henderson's doorbell camera across the street. The video was crystal clear. Clearwater Solutions truck arriving at 2:17 a.m., 2 figures in protective suits dumping death into my lake, vanishing at 2:43 a.m. 26 minutes to destroy 70 years of family heritage. That evening, I sat on my dock holding one of the smaller dead bass, remember my grandfather teaching me to cast in this exact spot. The wooden planks felt cold and splintered beneath my legs. The silence was deafening. No birds, no insects, no life around water that once bubbled with activity. Sander found me an hour later, both of us crying as we began the nightmare cleanup of environmental terrorism. But grief sharpens focus. As we filled bag after bag with Vivian's victims, my electrician brain started connecting dots. I'd installed solar panels on dozens of houses in the subdivision. I knew their utility systems intimately. Every house in Willow Creek Estates uses well water pumped from the same underground spring system that feeds my lake. The same aquifer, the same copper sulfate contamination, now flowing through limestone channels toward 847 unsuspecting homes. I had my water tested by an independent lab the next morning. The results made my blood run cold. Copper sulfate levels 4 times higher than EPA's safe drinking water standards. Vivian hadn't just poisoned my lake. She contaminated her entire neighborhood's water supply. Every faucet, every shower, every ice cube maker. Her perfect community had become a toxic waste site, and she was about to drink her own poison. Sweet metallic karma. That's when I dug deeper into my grandfather's property records. I thought I was building a stronger legal defense against Vivian's lawsuit. What I found instead was the equivalent of owning the only water well in a desert full of thirsty people. Monday morning, I drove to the county courthouse basement, that special kind of government purgatory that smells like old paper, dust mites, and crushed dreams. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead like angry wasps as I dug through file boxes untouched since people thought Y2K would end civilization. The original deed transfer from 1952 was buried under decades of irrelevant paperwork. My fingers were black with archival dust when I finally found it, written in formal legal language designed to make normal humans fall asleep. Then I hit the paragraph that made my heart stop. Including all water rights, surface and subsurface to underground spring system and tributaries thereto, in perpetuity. In perpetuity. Latin for forever and ever. Suck it. My grandfather hadn't just bought land. He bought every drop of water flowing to the underground spring system extending miles beneath Vivian's subdivision. I sat there in that dusty basement, hands trembling, holding a 70-year-old document that just made me the most powerful person in 3 counties. Thin, fragile paper. Words stronger than titanium. Here's where it gets delicious. I pulled the Willow Creek Estates development records from 2008. The developer's water usage permit claimed they drill independent wells with sustainable water sources. Independent wells tapping directly into my grandfather's spring system, 400 feet downstream from my lake. Every single one. The developer never purchased water rights because he probably didn't know they existed as a separate asset. Most people don't. They think owning land means owning whatever's underneath it. Wrong. Expensive assumption. Career-ending mistake. Knowledge nugget. Water rights are completely separate from land ownership and must be explicitly transferred. Failure to secure these rights can expose developers and homeowners to massive legal liability and usage fees. For 15 years, 847 families have been using my water without permission, without compensation, without even knowing their most hated neighbor literally owned every drop flowing from their taps. The math alone made my head spin. Average household usage times 847 homes times 15 years times market rate for water rights. Tens of millions in back payments I could legally demand. But the contamination angle? That was the diamond on top of this legal gold mine. Every home in that subdivision was now drinking water poisoned by Vivian's midnight chemical warfare. Copper sulfate symptoms include stomach pain, nausea, liver damage, and in children, developmental problems. The EPA treats this as a public health emergency. Vivian's lawsuit against me over 6 inches of dock space now looked like a toddler threatening Mike Tyson. I called Tom Martinez from the parking lot. Sunshine warming the truck's interior while my world tilted on its axis. Tom, I don't just own the lake. I own their entire water supply. Every drop they've used for 15 years is legally mine. Silence. Marcus, he finally whispered. You're not defending against a property dispute anymore. You're sitting on the biggest water rights case this state has ever seen. And if that contamination spreads through the aquifer, he didn't finish. We both knew Vivian had poisoned 847 homes using water that belonged to me. The power dynamic had just shifted so hard I could feel the earth move under her designer heels. When you discover you're sitting on a legal nuclear weapon, you don't start swinging it around like a drunk guy in a bar fight. You assemble a team of highly trained assassins who know exactly where to aim. First call, Rebecca Torres, environmental lawyer out of Raleigh who built her career destroying corporations that thought poisoning communities was just good business. Her office smelled like expensive espresso and vendetta when I walked in Tuesday morning. Water rights violation, environmental contamination, public health emergency, she said, eyes gleaming over my documents. Marcus, this isn't a lawsuit. This is a masterclass in legal warfare. They'll teach this in law schools for decades. Her strategy was beautiful. Hit them from every direction simultaneously before they even know they're under attack. Federal lawsuit for water rights theft. EPA emergency intervention for contamination. State criminal charges for illegal dumping. Civil suits for property damage and punitive damages that would make a lottery winner blush. Legal tactic. Overwhelm opponents with simultaneous legal actions from multiple jurisdictions. Force immediate defensive positions. They'll be too busy putting out fires to mount a counterattack. Second recruit. Dr. James Mitchell, hydrogeologist from North Carolina State, who makes opposing lawyers weep during depositions. We met at my Poison Lake Wednesday morning, where he spent 4 hours taking samples and mapping the underground spring system with equipment that probably cost more than my truck. Fascinating aquifer structure, he said, kneeling in contaminated water, still reeking of chemicals. His hands moved with surgical precision, while dragonflies, once swarming here, were notably absent. Single-source spring feeding directly into residential wells. Contamination will reach every home within 6 to 8 weeks. We're looking at 800 to 1,000 affected properties. The scientific hammer that would crush any doubt about Vivian's guilt. The third member of my team was Sarah Morgan, an investigative journalist with a 3-year streak of scalping corrupt HOAs like trophies. Her exposés had already toppled 2 presidents for embezzlement, and another who'd been running a full-on protection racket. When she saw my evidence, her face lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "This is Pulitzer material," she whispered, spreading files across my kitchen table as if handling sacred relics. Power-drunk HOA tyrant poisons an entire neighborhood while terrorizing the man who actually owns their water supply. CNN and MSNBC will fight each other for the first interview. Her background check on Vivian read like a serial killer's resume. 3 neighborhoods for harassment lawsuits, 2 restraining orders. 20 years of crushing anyone who dared question her authority. Dolores Martinez brought the historical ammunition. Over coffee that tasted like justice and bottomless refills, she slid yellowed permits across the table. "The original developer committed outright fraud," she explained, her weathered fingers tapping the paper. "He claimed water rights he never purchased, never owned, never even verified. Every homeowner here bought property under false pretenses. Legally, they've been stealing from you for 15 years. Rebecca crunched the numbers with calculator-level precision. Market rate for water rights in our county? $50 per household monthly. Multiplied by 847 homes over 180 months. $30.6 million in back payments I could demand before punitive damages for contamination. In water rights litigation, you calculate both direct usage fees and consequential damages from environmental contamination. Combined liability like that usually forces a settlement before your opponent can even mount a defense. But here's the line that separated justice from revenge. I wasn't going to financially annihilate 800 innocent families just to punish one psychotic woman. Offer a settlement, Rebecca proposed. Waive all back payments for 3 things: full lake restoration, Vivian's resignation, plus criminal prosecution and permanent oversight to prevent future abuse. Dr. Mitchell sketched the restoration plan right there on a notepad. 18 months of natural bioremediation, native fish restocking, aquatic plant renewal. Total cost? $250,000, to be paid jointly by the HOA and Vivian personally. Sarah lined up the media. NPR, Washington Post Environmental Desk, 3 cable networks salivating over HOA Karen Poison's neighborhood water supply. We'd filed a lawsuit and dropped the story simultaneously for maximum public pressure. The plan was elegant. Hit Vivian with federal charges, state charges, civil liability, and national media exposure all at once. Give innocent homeowners a path forward without bankrupting them. Force accountability without collective punishment. We had evidence strong enough to convict. Expert testimony no one could challenge. Media ready to turn Vivian Blackwater into a national symbol of HOA tyranny, and the moral high ground to play beautifully in court and public opinion. All we needed now was the perfect stage for Vivian's public downfall. The beautiful thing about watching someone's world collapse? That split second when they realize their cover-up is making everything worse. But they're too deep to stop digging. Vivian discovered the contamination the way karma intended, through her neighbors' complaints about the metallic taste in their morning coffee. Within a week, the Willow Creek Estates Facebook group exploded with posts about strange smells from the tap. Parents reported their kids getting stomachaches. One woman posted that her dog refused to drink from its bowl. The comment section became a digital panic room. True to form, Vivian went into politician-grade damage control. She posted an official HOA statement claiming the taste was natural mineral deposits and seasonal groundwater changes. Translation: nothing to see here. Stop asking questions. Trust your benevolent dictator. But desperate people do desperate things. Vivian contacted Clearwater Solutions, the algaecide company she'd hired, and offered the owner $10,000 cash to destroy their server's records. The stench of desperation could clear a room. What she didn't know, environmental services firms keep meticulous records precisely for liability reasons. The owner, Derek Thompson, recorded the whole conversation because a frantic woman offering cash bribes at 11 p.m. made his lawyer's senses tingle. Legal note: Attempting to destroy evidence or bribe a witness turns a misdemeanor into felony obstruction of justice. The cover-up is almost always worse than the crime. Meanwhile, she hired a bargain bin private investigator named Rick Patterson to dig up dirt on me. He followed me around town, photographing my truck, pestering my clients, even tried to break into my vehicle at the hardware store. I watched from inside as his cheap suit stretched over his back, called the police, and had him arrested for attempted vehicle burglary. His PI license was already on probation for overstepping legal boundaries. Vivian escalated. Anonymous complaints to the state contractor board claimed my solar business was operating without permits. Total fabrication. But enough to trigger a 2-week investigation and $3,000 in legal fees. This time, though, I documented everything. Every phone call, every complaint, every agency she tried to weaponize against me. Tip: in harassment cases, always check your state's recording laws. North Carolina is a one-party consent state. I could legally record every conversation without telling the other person. Meanwhile, the community health crisis deepened. A pediatrician in town flagged a spike in stomach problems among Willow Creek Estate's kids, symptoms consistent with heavy metal poisoning. Families bought bottled water in bulk. Others installed expensive filtration systems. The HOA Facebook group morphed into a support group for people convinced their water was poisoned. Vivian's solution? Blame aging infrastructure and announce a $500 special assessment per household for emergency water upgrades. She was literally charging people to fix the problem she created. The board meeting where she announced it was electric. 80 angry homeowners packed into the community center, the air thick with tension and burnt coffee. Parents stood up waving medical bills, threatening lawsuits. Vivian, in a designer suit and perfect makeup, lied through her teeth about mineral deposits and infrastructure failures. The woman could have taught master classes in gaslighting. 3 board members confronted her afterward about a mysterious $3,500 landscaping expense. She refused to show receipts, called it routine maintenance, and threatened to sue anyone questioning her finances. That's when board member Patricia Morgan, no relation to Sarah, began her own audit. Turns out, using community funds to poison a neighbor's property counts as embezzlement under North Carolina law. The walls were closing in. Her cover-up was creating new crimes faster than she could bury the old ones. And she still didn't know I owned the very water she contaminated. Then came the last phone call. Drop the lawsuit or you'll regret it, the disguised voice said. The desperation was unmistakable. I'll see you in court, I replied. Cornered animals either surrender or go feral. Vivian Blackwater went feral. She launched a neighborhood-wide defamation campaign worthy of a propaganda minister. 3 fake Facebook accounts with stock photos and fabricated histories. Suddenly, posts flooded the group accusing me of contaminating my own lake to frame the HOA. I was an environmental terrorist, a scammer running an insurance fraud scheme, a criminal hiding behind a solar business. Pure fiction, but repeated with enough confidence that people started believing it. Defamation law. Creating fake accounts to spread damaging falsehoods can trigger civil and criminal charges for aggravated defamation. The smear worked on some. I got hostile stares at the grocery store. 2 solar clients canceled contracts. Someone spray-painted L on my truck in the Walmart parking lot. The cheap paint smell lingered for days. Then came the moment of no return. Vivian showed up at my house on a Thursday evening, dressed down instead of in her usual power suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's mortgage. The sunset cast long shadows as her heels clicked on my driveway. Marcus, I think we can resolve this like reasonable adults, she said, setting the briefcase on my porch rail. Inside, neat stacks of $100 bills. $100,000 cash to drop all legal action and sign an NDA. The evening air smelled like honeysuckle and bribery. What she didn't know, I was wired. Tom Martinez had suggested it after her PI's arrest, and I'd gotten very comfortable with a little recorder taped to my chest. North Carolina's one-party consent law is a beautiful thing. You're offering me money to cover up the fact that you poisoned my lake and contaminated your neighborhood's water supply? I asked, making sure every word was crystal clear. "I'm offering you a reasonable settlement to resolve a property dispute," she replied, lawyer speak dripping like venom. "Good faith gesture, huh? Is that what we're calling attempted bribery now?" Her face went from fake friendly to ice cold in 2 seconds. She snapped the briefcase shut, the sound sharp as a gunshot. "You're going to regret this, Marcus. I have connections that will destroy you. I'll take my chances. Now get off my property before I add trespassing to the list of charges." She peeled out of my driveway, Lexus spitting gravel. Meanwhile, the environmental health emergency reached critical mass. Over 50 complaints poured into the county health department. Parents documented children's nausea, headaches, even skin rashes from bathing in contaminated water. The EPA opened an investigation after a county officer filed an official concern report. And when federal environmental agencies get involved, things escalate fast. They don't take kindly to hundreds of families, contaminated drinking water. When the EPA rolled into Willow Creek Estates on a Tuesday morning, it wasn't with clipboards. It was with high-tech water testing rigs that made Dr. Mitchell's setup look like a high school science fair. They tested wells across the subdivision, mapped the aquifer like a crime scene, and traced contamination right to the source. Their preliminary report confirmed what Mitchell had warned. Copper sulfate was spreading to the underground spring system. Levels were already brushing against federal emergency thresholds. In less than a month, the water would be officially undrinkable. That same afternoon, the EPA issued a public health advisory. Do not drink the tap water. Property values nosedived overnight. Nothing kills real estate faster than poison water. And Vivian Blackwater? She unraveled, shouting at herself in a grocery store parking lot. Husband gone. Kids gone, lawyer gone. The board finally voted her out after discovering she'd used HOA funds for her vendettas, private investigators, algae chemicals, even legal fees. By the time the county filed embezzlement charges, she was a cornered animal waiting for the trap to snap. But she still didn't know the worst part. She hadn't just poisoned her neighbors. She'd poisoned water that legally belonged to me. The showdown. The Pine Ridge Community Center hadn't seen a crowd like this in years. 300 people crammed into a hall built for 200. Standing room only. Sweat, nerves, burnt coffee. Cameras in the back. Deputies at the exits. EPA reps in the front row. On stage, Vivian sat stiff in her designer suit, face flawless, eyes feral. She kept checking her phone, praying for a miracle that wasn't coming. Patricia Morgan, the new board president, called a meeting to order. The crowd exploded. Parents yelling about sick kids. Homeowners shouting about property values crashing. Patricia raised her hands. The EPA will present their findings first. Dr. Sandra Murphy didn't sugarcoat it. Bright red numbers lit the projector. Copper sulfate, for times above safe standards. She pointed straight at my lake on the aquifer map. The contamination came from industrial algae dumping here. It spread to the groundwater feeding your wells. "Who dumped it?" someone shouted. Dr. Murphy's eyes locked on Vivian. "That's part of an ongoing criminal investigation." 300 heads turned. Silence colder than ice. My turn. Patricia cleared her throat. "Marcus Reed has information on property rights." Every camera swiveled as I walked the mic. "Most of you know me as the difficult neighbor who wouldn't stop fishing," I said. Vivian Blackwater spent months trying to drive me off my land with lawsuits, harassment, and eventually environmental terrorism. Vivian shot up. "That's slander." "Sit down, Mrs. Blackwater," the deputy ordered. I held up my grandfather's 1952 deed. "There's one paragraph you should all hear. All water rights, surface and subsurface, to the underground spring system and tributaries thereto, in perpetuity." The room went silent, except for the hum of the projector. In plain English, I said, "I own the water rights to the entire aquifer feeding the subdivision. Every drop you've used for 15 years legally belongs to me. The developer never bought those rights. He just drilled into my water without permission." Confusion turned to panic. Shouts filled the air. I raised my hand. "I'm not here to bankrupt anyone. I'm waiving back payments, Roughly $30 million you don't owe me. But Vivian Blackwater poisoned my lake. She contaminated water that legally belongs to me, and she did it while your children got sick. Rebecca Torres stood. Mrs. Blackwater faces federal charges for environmental destruction, state charges for illegal dumping and embezzlement, and civil property damage claims. We have video evidence, bribery recordings, and HOA financial documents. Deputies moved in. Vivian went white. "This is a setup," she screamed. "He poisoned his own lake." "Ma'am, we have a warrant for your arrest." The crowd erupted as she was cuffed and dragged out, shrieking. "You'll regret this. He's a redneck manipulating you all." The mask was gone. Pure rage. Pure classism. In front of 300 witnesses and 3 cameras. Aftermath. I returned to the mic. "Here's my proposal. Full environmental restoration, funded by insurance and restitution. No back payments for water usage. Independent oversight from now on." The crowd's fury turned to cautious relief. Patricia nodded. "The board unanimously supports this." Dr. Mitchell outlined a restoration plan. 18 months to clean the water, rebuild the ecosystem, and restore trust. Sarah Morgan's article went live before the meeting even ended. HOA president poisons entire neighborhood's water supply and property vendetta. 6 months later. At sunrise, I stood on my dock as native-based fingerlings splashed back into crystal-clear water. Big Bertha's descendants, thriving. The chemical stench gone, replaced by clean mineral air. Vivian? She pled guilty, federal prison, probation, restitution, community service. Lost her marriage. Lost her law license. Lost everything. The community transformed too. New HOA rules. Transparency, homeowner votes, resident rights protections. Democracy instead of dictatorship. And the twist? I opened my lake to the neighborhood. Kids learned to fish off the same dock where my grandfather taught me. Families gather for the new spring festival, raising money for conservation. From tragedy came tradition. Our legal case set precedent. Cited in 3 other North Carolina water rights disputes, taught in environmental law classes, and inspiring new HOA reform legislation. My small solar business grew into environmental restoration consulting. Sarah's article turned into a national movement. One poison lake became a story of accountability, healing, and change. Here's what I learned. Never let petty tyrants push you off your land. Document everything. Know your rights. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something better from the wreckage. Your turn. Have you faced HOA nightmares or property rights battles? Share your story. Real experiences create real change. Because at the end of the day, communities are stronger than tyrants. And truth will always outlast corruption.